What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Harbor.Church podcast. We're here with Pastor Josh today, taking a second helping of this weekend's message. Couldn't quite fit everything onto that first plate. We got a little bit more to dig into.
Yeah, I love that we get to do this.
Yeah, it's good. So we talked this weekend about David and Goliath. It's a fairly popular Bible story. Even if you've never read the Bible, you're probably familiar with the concept of it. And, you know, it's this little shepherd boy that takes down this giant. Iconic. I wonder a little bit for myself and for our listeners. It's this cool, iconic moment for sure, but certainly he had to have done some things to get to that point, right? Like, how do I, in my life, how do our listeners live in such a way that when we face a giant, we're ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, don't you think that's kind of the problem that people have with it is where's my giant, or how do I kill a giant? That wasn't David's first thing. It wasn't the first thing he'd ever had to face. It wasn't the first obstacle. It wasn't the first time he had to obey God. It wasn't the first time that he had to show bravery. I think a lot of people think that, right?
Yeah, you want to just be ready to go on the spot.
Yeah, we don't have much backstory to David prior to this really cool interaction with the Philistine Goliath. But if you read the story, when he says that he'll kill Goliath, that he's willing to fight Goliath, everybody tells him he's crazy and that he can't, and that, you know, it'll never happen. And his own brothers mock him because what? He is the lowest in his family. All he does is shepherd. And I mean, I don't know how many people know this, but like shepherding was the job they gave to the daughters. That was a woman's job, was to shepherd if you had daughters or women in your family, because there was none. David was just the youngest boy. He got stuck with that job, which we today were like, man, that's cool. You know, shepherding's fine. But like back then that would have been the furthest thing from masculine.
Yeah,
so
like shameful.
Yeah,
almost.
yeah. So he wasn't a warrior. He wasn't considered a warrior or a fighter. He's not even allowed to go to the battle until his dad wants him to bring this food. But what I love is even after his brothers tease him and they mock him, and even after everybody doubts him, he goes to the king, and King Saul says, like, yeah, no, you can't win this. There's no way you can win this. Goliath's so much stronger than you. And I think that's how we all feel kind of facing giants, is that they seem so intimidating. But what I love is if you read in 1 Samuel 17, David convinces Saul to let him fight Goliath by saying what? Remember what I know you know the story when David's like, oh no, I have a little bit of experience in fighting, not fighting human beings, but
Yeah, he's like, I've taken down some bears, I've beat a lion, I've killed some stuff.
Right. Yes, that's the part I'm talking about exactly. And maybe you've heard messages on that, and a lot of people, and rightfully so, pastors have said, you got to tackle your lions and your bears before you can tackle your giants. I think that's 100% true. The thing that caught my eye was this. Do you remember how David said he kills the lion and the bear?
I don't, to be honest.
Okay, he does not kill that lion and that bear with a slingshot. He actually says that he took his club and he probably a shepherd's staff or some other stick, and that's how he killed those animals.
Different tools.
Yeah, totally different tools. So as much as like you want to be like, oh, I'm an expert with a slingshot, his own credibility, his own experience wasn't with a slingshot and killing. I'm sure, I mean, he obviously had used it a lot, but that's not what he used when he fought the lion and the bear. But when he goes out to kill Goliath, for anybody who doesn't know the story, he kills Goliath with a slingshot by, you know, whipping that stone around his head and letting it loose, and it hits Goliath in the head. The reason I bring that up is the thing that he used in earlier battles is not the thing that he used in this big battle, because God doesn't have to just use one set of your skills.
Yeah.
I think the thing about David is not that he was such a skilled person with a slingshot or with a club. It was that he was available to be used by God, and he had the courage to take on the things that intimidated and scared everybody else. That's the tools that God used. Our willingness to trust God and stand up against culture or stand up against the world and the giants, that's how we end up tackling giants. It wasn't that David was great with a slingshot, because he hadn't killed anything with a slingshot. He had killed it with a club, but he doesn't even use the club, you know, like when you read that story, you're struck with the fact that God can use anything as long as we're willing to be used. The fact that David had experience just spoke to the fact that God was grooming him and showing him and developing him and growing him into becoming the kind of man that he could use that would stand on the battlefield.
Mm.
I don't know, a little bit like Joseph, Joseph learned how to be available to God while he was in Potiphar's house and in the prison. But I'm sure in the prison, he mopped floors and threw out latrine buckets.
Sure.
He didn't need that skill as the second in command of Egypt. What he needed to be humble enough to be used by God, courageous enough to say the tough thing, have a tough conversation, and actually be willing to have the faith to trust God through it. That's what God uses. And if you want to tackle giants, I don't think you have to practice one necessary tool. Like I got to be really good at speaking, or I got to be really good at something else. Just work on being good at saying yes to God.
Yeah, it's very Karate Kid, actually. Is what it's giving is do what's put in front of you and then watch what God does with that when the time comes.
Right, the wax on, wax off. You're never going to polish a car, but it actually is developing a completely different skill set.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the lion and the bear and the for Joseph, the prison, they're all, it was flexing that muscle of God's got me, I can trust him. And I think that's probably why more Christians don't tackle giants.
That's good stuff. Now, there's also this whole other piece of the story of David and Goliath where Saul is a pretty active member of that story, which is a little less well known, but he's the king at the time. He's this big dude, and he's in the mix with David. He kind of puts him down a little bit. You got any more to say on that? I feel like you were kind of chomping at the bit to get after that a little bit in the message and didn't have a chance.
Oh man, I know, Katie. I know you remember years and years ago when we did an entire series, Better Call Saul.
Ooh, that was good.
I think
we should bring that back.
I love that. King Saul is one of my favorite Bible characters, probably because I identify with him so much. He struggles with insecurity. He struggles with his identity. He's good, and then he's bad, and he's up, and he's down. And man,
he's tall.
Yes, super tall.
Same.
Yes, well, I knew you had said something in common.
Relatable.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, you know what? A lot of people don't want to draw this out, but like Saul gets picked to be king. And one of the most common things that people appreciate about him was that he was head and shoulders bigger than everybody else. So when the Philistines send out their biggest guy, we kind of already know who the Israelites' biggest guy is.
Yeah.
It's Saul, and he doesn't want to go. So they actually send out one of their smallest guys in David. And I've heard a lot of messages, and I honestly don't know what was in Saul's heart when he put his armor on David. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt to say that he wanted to help protect David in any way he could.
Sure.
I've heard people say he was trying to disguise David as the king, trying to make people think that he was actually willing to go out there, or and somehow take credit for David. If David does kill Goliath, it would be because Saul's armor protected him, or Saul's sword did the killing, and Saul would somehow still get credit. I don't know if that's true.
Sure.
I honestly think he was like, well, I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm not fighting him. So at the very least, let me help you out a little bit.
Yeah.
But the thing that got me was he puts however big he is, he's 2 feet taller than David, probably at least. And he's putting all that gear on David, and David just swims in it. He's just too small. Like, I mean, I'm 6'2". My son is so small. He's 7 years old right now. If I put any of my stuff on him, my shoes, my clothes, my hats, he's just buried in it.
Yeah.
Can you picture David doing that? And David has the courage and the wisdom to say, yeah, this isn't for me. This isn't what God has put on me.
Not easy to say to your king in that moment.
Of course not. Because, I mean, there's a lot of people in our lives that love us and tell us, hey, this is what you should do. This is what you need. Having the courage to say, no, that's not for me. That's huge. That's a big piece. But when you look at it, David, what's really cool about this is chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, David gets anointed by Samuel to be the next king. So David knew that God had plans for his life. And he gets this opportunity early on to go ahead and take kingship.
Step up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, I get to wear king's armor. Maybe I can wear the king's crown. Like, he could have taken that and said, yeah, this is me. But at the time where he was in his life, he was just a shepherd. And he is able to defeat Goliath because obviously God's divine intervention. But he does it as a shepherd boy, not as a warrior. And he becomes one of the greatest warriors of Israel, and not as a king. And he becomes the greatest king of Israel, but he wasn't ready for that yet.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, if I'm honest, I don't know, if you're honest, we try to do things that we want for ourselves down the future. We try to force it now. We try to make God bring a blessing right now. And David was wise enough, even as a teenager, to go, yeah, I'm not ready to be a warrior yet. I'm not ready to be a king. That armor isn't for me. That expectation isn't for me.
Yeah, so self-awareness and humility to be able to, like, that will be me someday,
Right.
but not right now.
I think we would be a lot better at tackling giants and moving forward if we weren't so eager to try to push our boundaries and just go, God's got me in this season right now. And even though this season doesn't feel very glamorous, I'm just a shepherd. Maybe you're a barista. Maybe you're a student in college. Maybe you're going, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm a whatever. I'm only a low-level salesman in my company. Okay, who cares? God can use shepherd boys to kill giants. He can use you right where you are. You don't have to feel insecure about that.
Yeah.
If anything, feel confident in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and if anything, we let that be our excuse to not say yes to God. Like, man, I'm just this. What's the point in these small steps of obedience when, in fact, the whole point is that's getting you to where you need to be?
Right. Is there anything that is just something in God's hands?
Yeah.
I mean, just fish and loaves, it was a meal for 5,000. I mean, nothing in the hands of God is just anything. It can be absolutely the greatest thing that's ever happened if we just trust him with it. I think that's the thing I wish I could talk about more to our church and that people would get. So I hope they get it today.
Me too, man. Any closing thoughts?
Man, just I'm excited that we can keep breaking this down to see what it looks like to grow as we talk about this in our current series, our Growing Pain series. But my biggest thing is I hope that everybody, whether they listen to this right now, this week, or years from now, David is so successful because he learns to say yes to God quickly, whereas we usually take weeks and months. And a lot of times we miss out on an opportunity to kill a giant because delayed obedience is actually disobedience, and God doesn't bless that. So like the quicker we can say yes, which David learned to do really, really well, the better off we're going to be.
Well, thanks, Pastor Josh. Keep tuning back in for more of this Harbor.Church podcast content. We'll keep it coming at you if you stay in check. I don't know what that final part was. We can cut that for sure. Stay in check. I don't know what that is. You know what? Keep the whole thing. We're not perfect.